The 14th Emir of Kano and leader of the Tijaniya movement in Africa, Muhammadu Sanusi, has met with the leaders of the military junta in Niger Republic. Now, the surprise meeting comes after the military junta had aborted a meeting with representatives of the African Union, the Economic Community of West African States, and a top U.S. diplomat. Last week, a delegation of ECOWAS who stormed the presidential palace in Niamey and met with both the coup leaders. Ousted President Mohamed Bazoum, immediate former president, could not broker peace as the military junta failed to grant audience to the delegation. However, Sanusi, whose Tijaniya sect has a large following in Niger, met with the military leadership. Their meeting comes 24 hours after the ECOWAS, led by President Bola Tinubu, imposed more sanctions on the military rulers. Well, for more on this, I'm joined live in the studio by Ibrahim Zain Conjy, a Chadian social-political activist, and very much apprised of what's happening on the ground in the Niger Republic. Good to see you, and thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start off by looking at the first cause, which many Africans would like to understand, especially in other countries where military have taken over. Now, what's the immediate cause? What do you think is the immediate cause of this military takeover? Because now we see that some citizens seem to be rejoicing over the takeover.
Great. Regarding that coup of 26th of last month, actually there were two episodes.
Two episodes?
Yes, please, on that coup. The earlier one, a coup was led by former chief of presidential guard, Ibrahim Omar Chayani. He started 5 o'clock or 5 a.m. Took the president hostage and then asked him to resign in order for him to take over. Actually, he did not have any valid reason by then. It was just personal misunderstanding. The man is about to go, and he wanted to retire him in form of retaliation. So around 11 in the morning...
Let me get this. It was time for Abdurrahman Chiani to leave the army, to retire.
Yes, please. So he attempted the coup by 5 a.m. So around 11, military came in, and the Guard National, what they call it, National Guard, also another paramilitary unit, a very strong force, actually, it's a parallel to the military. So they came and surrounded the presidency. And they asked Abdurrahman Omar Chayani to release the president, or we are going to attack. Because his own men already closed the doors and the windows or roads to the presidency. So from there, things got normal around 11. Later in the afternoon, communication within the military senior officers took place. Finally, they agreed on to continue with the coup. There were so many differences and misunderstanding between some of the military junta and Abdurrahman Omar Chayani earlier before 26th of the last month. So they had an agreement, it was consensus. Around 11 in the night, they released the coup bulletin from the national TV. Actually, by then they all came together, they made their concessions, and they gave a name, National Council for Protection of Our Homeland. So all the military units, they came and accepted and supported the military coup. So for a couple of days, they refused to announce because negotiation was going on between the different factions. And those people who had misunderstanding, a person like now, the Deputy Military Council, the second person, General Salif Modi, former Chief of the Army, a man well respected within the Niger community, within Niger Army. So there was a little misunderstanding between him and President Bazoum. Bazoum retired that man and sent him an ambassador to Dubai. It was barely in a form of exile. So happened to be, he was there in Niamey. So they all accepted Abdurrahman Omar Chayani to be the leader of the military council. Salif Modi, General Salif Modi, former chief of the army, as a deputy. The seventh chief of the army, equally, he supported the coup and stood with them, and he did not even request for any post apart from the membership. Last week, they appointed 8 governors, and Niger has 8 states. So 8 military governors have appointed them. None of them was a general. All were from middle ranks.
So, you know, looking at this, it would seem as if now you're talking about some career threat now to General Tiani, who was leaving office on one hand, and look at the other general who's been moved to Dubai. But again, let's now delve into what is happening now. ECOWAS, AU, and those other Francophone countries, 5 countries where military rule is at the moment. What do you make first of former rebel leader and politician in Niger? I think Risa Agboola, who's spoken saying he would fight on the side of ECOWAS and not in support of the coup leaders.
Well, Risa Agboola, as you rightly mentioned, he was a former rebel leader. A man was a close friend to ex-president, if I may say, Bazoum Mohammed, was appointed as Minister of State. A man was barely heading all the ministers, or all the ministers.
Risa Agboola.
Risa Agboola. So, in fact, even if the president, Bazoum, is traveling out, he assigned him to take his work till he returns back. The man from Agadez is very influential in that Agadez site. But within Niamey, so he has very little impact if Bazoum is not on seat. So that threat may not have much difference, if you ask me.
At the moment, no one has seen or heard from Bazoum lately. A few of these emissaries trying to speak to the coup leaders have not been able to speak to Bazoum, making people wonder if Bazoum is okay.
Well, Bazoum had appeared on the screen when Chadian President Mohamed Idriss Déby Itno, by the time he landed in Niamey, he met the leader of the junta, Abdurrahman Omar Chayani, and the second in command, Salif Modi, and the ex-president, former president Mohamed Yusufu, and with Bazoum as well. He met with all of them. So if we're fair enough with the military agenda, this one goes to the military junta's credit. This is the first ever a president in Francophone country have been ousted by the military coup looters, safe and sound. He's with his phone communicating with international agencies, with dignitaries, with UN, with the American Foreign Secretary, with the African Union, freely, to the extent is tweeting. So we are very much sure at this point he's safe and sound.
National Council for the Protection of Our Homeland. That's what they call the government in place in Niger at the moment. What protection are they talking about?
Well, in Niger, before the coup, the situation, socio-economical situation in Niger was not sound. Things were actually deteriorating drastically. And so many people, or let me say generally the Niger community, the nation had so many grievances. Out of that, the insecurity, and unfortunately Niger, among the very few countries from different regions, insecurity is boiling. terrorism is hitting the nation is the southern part, Mali, Burkina Faso border, and the northeast of Nigerian border. Both are highly unstable. And there's no tangible and visible impact from the government side to settle those problems. So discontent was there to massive extent. But I tend to think the protection, what they are talking about, to free the country from the control of France. And that's what met Niger, the citizens from four corners of the nation came out publicly in support of the military junta. Not because of they want the military regime, no. The aim, they came on board to liberate the country from the control of France. And I tend to think from there where they gotten that name.
So you think this is liberation?
That's what Niger people are perceiving as for now.
Well, we saw the initial, flash protest when the coup took place, waving of Russian flags and downing that of France. You might want to speak to us more on what exactly is happening. We saw the France Bacan, how they are initially protested in some other Francophone French and free nations. And now this is Nigerians saying that, well, they don't want the former colonial masters. Speak to us on this seeming uprising in these countries against France.
Great. Let us flash back to the history, but to scramble to Africa, 1884. France was among the largest countries.
That's the Treaty of Westphalia.
Yes, please, where they came and colonized massive part of the continent, especially the central part of the continent and the western part of the continent. France had committed unspeakable crimes, perpetrated inhuman atrocities against those nations. Economical, social, political, security, justice, so on and so forth. But by 1960, France claimed that, gave independence to those countries. Actually, it was just on a paper. In reality, France is still fully on control of those countries in their decisions, in their economy, in their military, in their resources. Let us bring concrete evidences. Those countries in French-speaking countries or Francophone countries in West Africa, all of them, they are compelled to use French currency. Likewise in Central Africa, about 5 of them or 6 of them compelled to use French currency. And the foreign reserve of those countries kept in French central bank.
So it wasn't a matter of choice?
No. And then annually they are paying to French coffers so-called colonial price for France to come and colonize Africa, to loot their resources, to destroy their lands, and now those countries are paying back annually to France for destroying their lands. And this is a point of no discussion. Any African president from those countries dare to think about to reschedule or whatsoever, definitely that will be the end of that president. So in Africa, we had about more than 115 military coups. More than 90% of them are in French-speaking countries. Let me say all of those countries, with the exception of Senegal, only the remaining either military, several military coups have occurred, or civil unrest, or civil wars, genocides happen all in all of those countries, with the exception of Senegal.
Are there evidence pointing to this?
No doubt about it. Just point me a country out of them. Point for me any country. Those French speaking. I will tell you what French intelligence service had perpetrated of crimes. In Rwanda, in Central Africa, in Congo, in DRC, in Chad, in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Cameroon, in Togo, that little tiny country. The first coup in sub-Saharan Africa was in Togo, 1963. So it was brutal, and the president by then was killed brutally. Most of those coups were carried out by France. When the president want to negotiate, definitely they will end up with bloody coups. And most were orchestrated in Paris and ordered those agents of France in Africa to perpetrate those crimes.
You know, I assume without conceding that that's what it is. But again, they still also use the natives, the citizens of those countries. So how is it that the overwhelming majority are not aware of this kind of incursion by its former colonial masters to see that the fight against being used for such usurpation of power?
Thank you so much for this key question. In those French colonized countries, deliberately France has deprived those nations from their fundamental rights. People were disconnected from their rights. So only French agents, elements, where the elite had access to the authority. Education was sub-zero. In Niger, the first university was in the 80s. Till 2000, they had only one university. In Mali, the first university was in the 90s. Till today, they have a handful of universities in the whole nation. This is one of the largest countries in Africa.
So tertiary institution had to be in France?
They do not exist. See about the infrastructure, sub-zero. The institution, nothing. In Chad, we had the first university was 78. Until today, there is no sound public university apart from University of N'Djamena. So at that stage, what do you expect? The nations are cut off from their own authority. Only few elites who had been trained and to serve France are there, retorting among themselves. And all are identical cases.
So what's the place of the sub-regional bloc, ECOWAS, in all of this?
We shouldn't forget ECOWAS is economical committee. It's not a military. It's not pure political. And let me be brutally honest. Most of our African countries are not yet independent, whether French speaking or English speaking or Portuguese or Spanish. Most of them are still, their final word comes from the colonial masters. So those our regional and continental institutions are receiving their directive directly from the colonial masters. So let me just point out one incident. We have one nationalistic, sound African lady, Professor Arikana, Zimbabwean professor. I salute to this great woman. She's an icon on African revolution.
She's been speaking. She's been speaking.
Very well. And we're supposed to, in Africa, every leader to speak with her voice. But unfortunately, due to the reason most of us we know, they are afraid to come out. She was ambassador of AU ambassador to US. She come out on YouTube. Part of what I'm saying, she brought them. Within 24 hours, her appointment was terminated. An African ambassador in US criticizing French wrong policies against Africa, which are clear crystal crimes perpetrating France in all those African countries. With evidence, she brought them. What is the crime there? And the same France always chanting and making hell of noise that we have freedom of expression and democracy and whatever, have been telling us, teaching us, preaching us. Is that the rule of democracy? Is that the freedom of expression? So those our institutions still, they are getting massive part of their fund from the colonial masters. The person who pays you definitely will order you. That's exactly what is happening. Unfortunately, ECOWAS meeting on 30th of last month, on Sunday, to me it was an embarrassing. Let me take the chain of the events. The coup was on Wednesday, 26th of June. On Saturday, 29th, French Defense Council met on extraordinary meeting regarding the coup in Niger. Was the coup in Niger or in France? If it was in France, I don't know what the business of French Defense Council to call for extraordinary meeting. Now they met, they discussed. The moment they finished, they made their connection or communication. ECOWAS had summoned for the leaders to come to Abuja in less than 24 hours. Most of the African or West African members of the ECOWAS state president were in Russia, in St. Petersburg, having meeting with Putin. So those ones who were close to France, who have refused to go to Russia, they came to Abuja. And they brought, this was unprecedented. ECOWAS is a community of the neighboring countries.
So are you implying that that meeting was at the instance of France, the ECOWAS meeting that held in Abuja?
Undoubtedly. If you ask me, that is my opinion. That's not the problem. The meeting took place and everything, it seems like, was already made. In ECOWAS charter, ECOWAS is an economical development committee. There's no single article states ECOWAS should intervene militarily in a member state. I salute the Nigerian lawmakers, the great Nigerian Senate. They oppose it. The lawmakers could not violate the law. Yes, we should not support the military coup. We need the rule of law. We need real democracy. What we have in Africa is not a democracy. It's piracy, massively. Most of our elections are rigged.
So let's look at way forward. Ibrahim, you've seen Lamido Sanusi meeting Chiani, and we also understand that there's a large Tijaniya sector in Niger Republic. He's been the only one who's been so lucky to have a sit-down with Abdurrahman Chiani. So do you see an end to this, political logjam in Niger?
Well, for military junta accepting Lamido Sanusi, less than 24 hours, another delegation came and was rejected. UN, AU, ECOWAS. The reason ECOWAS used actually aggressive manner in the first place provoked those military junta. Military coup is not something peculiar to Africa. As I said earlier, we have over 115 military coups. In Niger alone, there are 5 military coups earlier. Within the last 3 years, we had 7 military coups in the region, in Africa. None was approached with the approach have been received by this military junta. So they were reacting vigorously. They came to the stage. Now things we hope will come down. Dialogue is the best solution.
And there's a meeting here in Abuja tomorrow that will be presided over by the ECOWAS chairman, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu. And again, the US has said, well, it's still hopeful that something just might happen. And again, if that does happen, if Bazoum is reinstated, what do you think will happen to the coup leaders? And knowing full well by the laws of Niger, if you attempt a coup, the penalty is death.
Well, we shouldn't jump to conclusion.
That's jumping to conclusion already.
Yes, no, let us wait for the meeting of ECOWAS tomorrow. But anyway, things are now taking better dimension. For ousted president to come back is not regular. Within 115 coups, military coups occurred in Africa, only one ousted president came back. That was Gabonese president, Léon Mba, back to 1964. He was ousted by military coup and brought back by French special forces, intervened and brought him back to the office, remained till he died. Otherwise, we don't have any other case. So for Bazoum to come back is going to be, I don't think it will going to be so easy. But what we want, let us take the case of Mali, which happened just 2 years back, or 3 years maximum, or the one of neighboring Burkina Faso. ECOWAS and the other mediators should give terms to the military junta. Let the rule of the constitution and the democracy should come back. For them to be transitional and with limited terms to organize free and fair election. One funny about thing, 2010 there was a military coup in Niger. And French government by then was supporting that military coup. Bazoum, the current president, the ex-president, he was a lawmaker, he was a parliamentarian, he was on the street chanting, shouting, supporting the military coup 2010. So now things has taken another dimension. Anyway, we hope for peace. This ultimatum, threatening, given tough condition, military official will never come with a solution. We are satisfied. Our region became war zones.
Speaking of war zones, let's close on that, because just recently we saw countries going into war against itself, Ethiopia and the Tigray people. That wasn't good, and that is why many Nigerians are saying, looking at the 7 states that border Niger, should anything go on towards, then it will be likened to what has happened in Ethiopia and the Tigrayans. So what do you think will be the resolution? You say you don't want to jump into conclusion. This is not about conclusion. If all else fails and is still pointing to military action, what will this mean for the ECOWAS region?
Well, we pray should not be so. Military intervention, no foreign military intervention come with good result, apart from destruction. And now with the ultimatum, we have seen now ECOWAS itself in danger. Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, members, they declared any military intervention in Niger is a war declaration against them. And they promised will withdraw from ECOWAS. So it's not a joke, it's a very serious issue. So it's going to be the region of war in case it happens. Sorry, before I should forget, what France really wanted to bring back Bazoum through what France has done in Ivory Coast 2010 against Laurent Gbagbo. That's really what France wanted to do. But for French forces to come openly, definitely it will anger the continent and the world as well. For that, France wanted to use some agents here and there just to cover them, and the French forces, 1,500 personnel are in Niger today, and over 7 military bases are there. All Niger airports are controlled by French army.
And as you run away from France, shouldn't you also be wary of running into the wide open arms of the Russians?
Well, first of all, I'm against any occupation. We want to be free, and our destiny should be in our hands as African nations. To run from colonization and fall into another colonization definitely is not a solution. But a message to France and co. Let them be ashamed of themselves. What will make it legal for them to come and intervene in Africa and will make a crime for Russia to be present? For what? Let us be objective. Anyway, Russia, Mali, Burkina Faso, the recourse for Russia, if Russia was not brought, or Wagner Group, definitely military intervention by French forces we have witnessed in Mali back.
Because Africa is important, and that's why we gave this entire show to this issue about Niger. Ibrahim, Zain, Conjy, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I do hope you come back again here on Arise Prime Time for us to have this conversation.